like to call the meeting of the Senate Subcommittee on Senate Finance and Appropriations Subcommittee on Transportation to order. And we have an agenda today, an overview of the governor's proposed budget for transportation's SB 29 and SB 30. And our presentation today will be conducted by Jason Powell, Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee staff. Jason, you have the floor.
Thank you, Senator Marsden and members of the Transportation Subcommittee. It is truly my honor to be here with you again today. You heard most of this yesterday, so it shouldn't be very long this afternoon. Beginning in Senate Bill 29, there are a number of actions, the largest which is a one-time general fund action of $115.8 million from the FY22 surplus. That is statutorily directed to go for non-recurring transportation expenditures according to the code. In the introduced budget, those funds are distributed as follows. $30 million for improvements at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport. This is to benefit all of the users of the spaceport. It is also very closely related to a potential MEI-related project for a current user at the spaceport as well. There is $25.8 million to support the development of a multi-use trail initiative that is supported then in Senate Bill 30 with an additional north of $200 million for a total of around $230 million for the statewide trails initiative. As the language is currently in the introduced, it does include some specific projects, including the Fall Line Trail in Central Virginia, the Shenandoah Valley Rail Trail, and the Eastern Shore Rail Trail. There's $20 million for the air terminal interchange project in partnership with the Navy. That's down off 564. There is $20 million for improvements to I-64 in between between exit 205 and 234 there out of the Newport News into the Williamsburg area. That's the last section that needs to be widened to complete the corridor. There is $10 million proposed for deposit to the Priority Transportation Fund to replenish funding that was put into the 2021 Transportation Initiative. It was one of the sources when we picked all the pockets at VDOT. This would replenish one of the pockets that we picked. There is $10 million proposed for projects to remediate the loss of wildlife habitat impacted by the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel construction project. You will recall that that has been an issue of some challenge now as the project has been progressing. In Senate Bill 29, there is also an increase of VDOT's appropriation by $647 million to reflect the December forecast as well as the anticipated formula funding increases from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Stress that it's formula increases because part of the language agreement that we did last year in the 2021 Transportation Initiative was some specific verbiage that directed the CTB to have responsibility for programming those additional formula-driven money. So it's not, and according to the letter of the budget law, it's really not a discretionary funding source or new money for purposes of one-off type projects. Also related to that, there are a number of language amendments in Senate Bill 29 that reflect changes to references to programs that were included in the IIJA, as well as direction for VDOT to begin developing a plan of allocation for the bridge program and the bridge replacement rehabilitation preservation program, as well as developing a plan for the use of the funds made available through the National Electric Vehicle Formula Program.
Jason, do we have information on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act as to how that money is to be, how prescriptive are they in terms of how the state shall spend it?
Senator Marsden, the bulk of the funding that Virginia is going to receive comes through formulas, through increases to the formula allocations. So there will be bridge formula allocation, there will be the CMAG formula allocation. I'm looking at Laura to make sure she's nodding along correctly, right? And those things flow through sort of the CTV process. Then there is a large amount of money at USDOT for competitive projects. So there's the bulk of the IIJA cash that was made available is in those competitive programs. So really, what I think you're going to see in the next few years is VDOT submitting a lot of applications for projects to participate in the various programs managed
And does
by-
the federal government, do they have something similar to our metrics for, determining what projects to fund, or is this a political process? How do they make their determinations as to what gets funded? Is it just kind of split between states to keep everybody happy, or?
I think, Senator Marsden, no state has a project scoring methodology as rigorous, as vetted, and as evolved as the Commonwealth. Right? So there is no federal SMART scale. Right? We're a national leader and have been replicated in several states in that respect. And then I'd say it's probably a little from column A and a little from column B to how the machinations of the U.S. DOT, Federal Highway Administration, works.
Okay.
Also in 29 and continued in 30 is an authorization for the sale of one of the state jets, the King Air. They would like an airplane replacement. It's relatively old. I think it's maybe an 8-year-old aircraft at this point in time. There is authorization at DMV. There's language that would exempt the purchase of transit buses from having to be manufactured, from being licensed, from the manufacturer being licensed in Virginia. There are apparently no Virginia-based manufacturers that would comply with the regulations under, is it IIJA? I'm looking at Lisa.
No, it's FTA.
It's FTA's requirements. So without this, we're unable to purchase certain fuel-efficient and electric buses, any kind of buses. So that's in conflict with federal statute. Discussed the rest of the configures. Wait, also in VDOT, there's language directing.
Do you need to advance the?
No, I'm going from the published document that's available now on our website, which is the general overview. It has slightly more information, and because we had some time, I just wanted to walk through things that were not in the document that I presented before the full committee yesterday. And I think the last thing that I would hit on is a JLARC. There was a JLARC language recommendation to direct VDOT to evaluate the condition of city streets, and that is included in both Senate Bill 29 as well as Senate Bill 30. Moving into the big bill in Senate Bill 30, the formula fund increase ripples through into the biennium, reflected in about upward adjustments of about $1.8 billion, with the bulk of that being about $1 billion in the second year. I will note that the introduced budget does require a technical amendment of about a reduction of about $200 million, slightly less than that, over the biennium to reflect the policy decision related to the tax on food for human consumption. The policy decision was made after the go-live decision for forecasting, or for embedding the money in VDOT's budget. The forecast, and the official forecast, reflects that reduction. It's just a technical amendment to catch the budget bill up with the policy decision.
Okay, contingent on us approving that.
Contingent upon approving the policies.
Right.
There's a proposal, as I mentioned, in the discussion of 29 for $207 million into the multi-use trail program. There's a smaller action of $165,000 to improve or to renovate the playground at the VDOT building. There's a child care facility that's run by VCU Health Systems. It's located on VDOT's campus, and it has a very decrepit playground. There is the establishment of the new Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. So it gets its own item, and then funding is transferred for the DRPT and some from VDOT to stand up passenger rail and all of the passenger rail programs. There is a new pass-through entity for the budgeting of the regional funds, so that those are all put in one place and are not misrepresented in the budget document as within VDOT's budget. So it clearly reflects the things that are going to, the funding that's going to Northern Virginia Hampton Roads and the Central Virginia authorities. There are the language amendments that I spoke about relative to 29, as well as two new appropriations, one for the Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost Savings Transportation Program, PROTECT program, as well as $34 million for the Carbon Reduction Program. The language, as I mentioned earlier, for VDOT to conduct a review of city street payments is continued in 30. The DMV language with respect to the transit buses is continued in the big bill. The authorization for the state plane replacement is continued in the big bill. There is a proposal at DMV to transfer the motorcycle training program back to being an insourced program from its current outsourced approach. And then in capital outlay at DMV, there is a proposal to provide $2 million for maintenance reserve in each year and $7.5 million to replace the Hilltop Customer Service Center in Virginia Beach. I've covered most of those. I think the biggest thing happening in terms of dollar-wise after the bike trail initiative is the port. And at the port, it is primarily capital outlay related. As you can see, there is $266 million general funds proposed for improvements to the NIT North, as well as $17 million for improvements to the Portsmouth Marine Terminal as part of the ongoing investments in the offshore wind industry. There are a series of other capacity and throughput improvements that are done with non-general fund authorization. You will recall that the sort of capital outlay bond authorization for the Port Authority is included in the port's budget section. So there's authorization in there, and then an increase in their budget for increased debt service related to the issuance of these bonds that are supported with their terminal revenues. And that, Mr. Chairman, is everything that's going on in transportation this year. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I've covered everything down to the small things.
Okay. The one of the concerns I have just, related to trails, as I've explained to you, is the trying to complete the trail on Georgetown Pike, where we've got to get a decision, from the Park Service as to whether they'll let us come through Great Falls Park. But one of the things just to keep in the forefront is that, here we are building a trail across the American Legion Bridge. There'll be a multi-use trail, and they're not allowing us to hook up to the C&O Canal Trail. They're taking us way off into the interior of Maryland onto MacArthur Boulevard, when most people are going to want to use the C&O Canal. They're taking us inland and dumping us off on MacArthur Road, where you can turn around and get back to the C&O Canal that way, but it's a several mile detour. And they're giving us the reason that they don't want people using the trail because it'll require maintenance problems. So in other words, they got a trail they don't want you to use because they'll have to maintain it at a higher level or something. So, and that's going to really inhibit people using bike to work if they can't use the C&O Canal, because a lot of people don't want to go to MacArthur Boulevard.
Need to fix that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm trying.
Work on that, work on that.
Mr. Chairman, as a participant in the multi-use trail work group over the summer, I advocated from my position as staff to the Senate's position that the multi-use trails program should be programmatic in nature, right? That does require some specific General Assembly decision making. Where do you house the office? That plane was not landed as a result of the working group. How do you bifurcate the money for things like accessibility and for smaller trails and connecting trails, as opposed to just fully funding investments in long distance trails? There were questions that do require legislative leadership to answer correctly. I'm sure that's something we'll be discussing.
Yeah, well, as chairman of this, of committee now, I assign Senator Hanger all those responsibilities. What do you think of it?
Yep, well, yeah, I'll be right on out there with my bike.
There you go.
Yeah.
But, yeah, just let us know, Jason, what you think we need to do, what kind of actions need to be taken. Where would those actions be taken to make those determinations in Senate Finance?
There's certainly enough, there's certainly enough money to get to where you want to be. I think the skull work and the decision-making will be with the partnership approach that's been taken heretofore with DCR and VDOT, right? What really maximizes the Commonwealth's return on the investment with respect to how quickly things can be built, the processes, who has the best, material agency infrastructure in terms of financing staff and design staff to execute projects that need sort of the design assistance, right? Or is it just a grant-making entity that provides grants out to small groups to do these things? I think that the best of both worlds is what you're looking for. How we get there, I will look for your guidance and continue to think on the best way
So
to
that just
structure it.
would be language in the budget to determining?
So I think the challenge, Senator Marston, to be honest, and this, granted, this was at the end of an administration transition into the next one, is that it's hard to make the call, right? And sometimes the hardest part of leadership is making that decision as to whether or not in these things that are both have an affinity to the natural resources and the user community, and that have a material commuter pattern impact, as you were discussing with your trail experience, right? Who is responsible for it does communicate a message to the end user community, and maybe there's a hybrid way to borrow a little bit of both, or maybe there are some personnel that could be realigned to create an office. But I continue to think on it and hear from stakeholders and things like that, and I'm sure you will.
I mean, could you use budget language to say that DCR and VDOT should collaborate on
Senator, I believe they do now.
Mhm.
I think it's for the execution purposes.
okay.
Where would you
Right.
put money? Who would shepherd an application process? How would those be prioritized? VDOT has a very mature system for prioritization, and certainly in engineering capacity. However, DCR has, another end of that spectrum altogether. Smaller things like single track trails and mountain trails and parks. And they come in such a variety and flavor, right? And have a different cost of construction. I don't know that I can lead the thought all the way there, but I can certainly work with you all, get your opinions, help figure out what you think works best as you talk to stakeholders through the process.
Well,
I'm sure
hopefully
by
we
the
can-
time we get to report out, we'll have.
Yeah, and obviously we'll be able to talk to, Shep Miller is coming to my committee, not tomorrow, but next Thursday. He's going to appear virtually. He's the new Secretary of Transportation.
Right,
He will
Shep.
come from the VDOT. And Secretary of Natural Resources, will be coming before us.
Right. In the planning study for the Shenandoah Valley Trail, a request was made to the Secretary of Transportation, and she authorized VDOT to jump on that, and they did a
Okay.
great job of facilitating that study.
Yeah. I
assisting
mean, do
with
we
that
stick
study.
them with everything, or, do we alternate between the two, or is it?
My experience was, and Senator Hanger, I don't mean to talk over you, but certainly there are two camps, and there are certainly, the staff at DCR have done a tremendous job, right? The feedback was across the board positive, and the people that have an affinity for the DCR staff certainly do, right? And to the totality of it, DRPT also has a role in trail planning as well. So I mean, if you're solely looking at it from who the players are, there's slightly more players in the transportation side of the world.
Right now. You cross the bridge, there's access to it, and you go right to Claire Barton Parkway. You have to go to MacArthur Boulevard. 'cause
No,
it's
this
rain.
is a bike trail that's going to be on the new bridge. that they won't allow to hook up to the CNO.
If it hooks
Trail.
up to Canal Road,
Well, it's gonna go all the way up apparently to MacArthur.
Oh.
It'll be a several mile detour, and they'll have to backtrack to get back on the CNO.
well,
That's what I-
MacArthur's not, doesn't intersect 2 miles, it's only about a quarter mile
Yeah.
past the river.
And what's gonna happen is you go over, and then you gotta come down MacArthur, and then you're further up the trail than where you would have been, so it's apparently a couple of,
Yeah,
a couple of
right
miles.
across the dam.
All right.
Well, they will be.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I got a question, related to transportation language proposals here.
Yes, sir.
The, looks like 45 million, for resiliency operation planning and another 34 million, for non-general fund for carbon reduction program. Is that from existing flows already from Reggie?
Those are 2 new programs that are established in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So, not, in addition to
In-
increasing the formula funds that we're getting for the existing programs,
Uh-huh.
they have created those 2 new programs. And that's the
They, the
formula,
feds
they and the
have, or-
feds,
or
they
we
the
have?
feds. The feds have created those 2 new programs.
Really?
And that's what they're, those are the federal names of the programs.
Okay.
So,
The, wonder if we could change the names and use that money to, work on the wastewater overflows from stormwater in James River. That's an awful lot question.
I've tilted my head to see that that's probably not going to be feasible.
That would make us more resilient, wouldn't it?
I was still trying to get my head around the difference between 25 outfalls in Richmond
Oh, my
versus
goodness,
4
it's-
in
it's-
Alexandria.
oh,
And that
it's-
job
it's complicated.
cost a fortune.
It's complicated, and it's on the order of what they had to do in DC with all that tunneling up there. You're talking billions. that
Which
they spent.
required a tunnel boring machine.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
And,
yeah.
and I understand that the tunnel boring machine that's currently in Hampton Roads is designed specifically for the substrata of Hampton Roads. And that
Uh-huh.
they're such highly stylized machines for the rock that they're gonna go through, that it's very difficult to move them to a different geological region and deploy the technology for more than one thing. And in fact, I've heard that there's probably enough life on the TBM for the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel to possibly do another Monitor Merrimack tube. It's in the same location, but, you know, that's a decision that will be made years in the future.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Is there anything,
That's it.
anything else that we need to go over? Anyone? Questions from the audience? If not, yes, ma'am, Lisa.
Lisa Duffrey, Virginia Transit Association. I don't have a question, but regarding your comments about the trails, it came up at the CTV meeting last week, and Mary Hines, the Northern Virginia representative, raised some of the same concerns. So you might want to touch base with her and maybe compare notes. So
Okay,
just
that's a good
let
idea.
know
Thank
that
you.
that was a topic of discussion.
Yeah, I have contacted, fortunately, former Secretary of Natural Resources, Matt Strickler, is in charge of the Park Service as the Deputy Secretary of the Interior. And I do have an email into him to set up a meeting at the end of session. And hopefully Mary and a few of us can get together and see if we can solve this. So thank you. With that, the meeting will adjourn.
Okay.